I showed up at my parents' house unannounced and saw them yelling at my 6-year-old black daughter, "Serve coffee to your cousins. This is your place in the family." That's when I stopped paying their bills. My name is Carol. I'm 32, work as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, and I thought I knew my family. I thought I could trust them with the most precious thing in my world, my 6-year-old daughter, Maya. That Tuesday in March started like any other. I left Maya at my mother's house before work, the same routine we'd followed for 2 years since I couldn't afford full-time daycare on my salary. Mom always seemed happy to watch her granddaughter, and Maya loved playing with her cousins. My sister Jessica's twin girls, Emma and Sophie, who were 7. I finished a client presentation earlier than expected and decided to surprise everyone by picking Maya up early. Maybe we could grab ice cream, just the two of us. I used my key to enter through the back door, planning to announce myself, but voices from the living room made me pause. "Maya, the grown-ups need more coffee. Go refill the pot," I heard my mother's voice, sharp and commanding in a way I'd never heard her use with the twins. "But Grandma, I want to play with Emma and Sophie," Maya's small voice replied. "Those girls are busy with their new tablets. You need to learn your place in this family, young lady. Some children are born to be served, others to serve. Now go." I stood frozen in the hallway, my briefcase suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. Through the doorway, I could see Maya, barely tall enough to reach the coffee maker, carefully pouring water while my mother sat supervising. Emma and Sophie were sprawled on the couch with brand new iPads, completely absorbed in their games. "Clean those crumbs off the table too," Mom continued, "and be careful not to disturb your cousins. They're using expensive equipment." Maya nodded silently, her little hands working to sweep crumbs into her palm. She moved carefully, almost fearfully, around the coffee table where her cousins sat. Neither Emma nor Sophie looked up. They were used to this. That's better. "You see, Maya, everyone has their role. Some families raise children to expect things handed to them, but that's not realistic for everyone. You need to understand that early." The words hit me like physical blows. I watched my beautiful daughter, with her father's warm brown skin and my green eyes, being turned into a servant while her lighter-skinned cousins were treated like princesses. The coffee pot in her small hands shook slightly as she carried it back to the kitchen. My mother noticed me before I could decide whether to reveal myself. "Carol, you're early." Her tone shifted instantly to the warm, grandmotherly voice I knew. "What's going on here?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt tight. "Oh, just having Maya help out a little. She's such a good girl, always eager to help Grandma." Maya looked at me with confusion and something else. Was it relief, or fear that I'd disapprove of her not helping enough? "Maya, honey, get your backpack. We're leaving." "But I didn't finish cleaning," she whispered. Those 5 words broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. My 6-year-old daughter thought she needed permission to stop being a servant in her grandmother's house. "You don't need to clean anything, baby. Let's go home." As we drove away, Maya was quiet in the back seat. Finally, she asked, "Mommy, why do Emma and Sophie get to play while I have to work?" I pulled over because my hands were shaking too much to drive safely. In the rearview mirror, I saw my daughter's innocent face, still trying to understand why her world was different from her cousins. How long had this been happening? How had I missed it? "You don't have to work, Maya. You're a little girl. Little girls are supposed to play." Grandma says I'm different from Emma and Sophie. She says I have to learn early. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. This wasn't just favoritism or old-fashioned ideas about helping with chores. This was systematic, deliberate, and cruel. And it had been happening under my nose while I trusted my family to love my daughter the way I did. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and forced myself to remember other moments I'd dismissed or explained away. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was uglier than I wanted to admit. Sitting in my kitchen that night, memories I'd buried came flooding back. 5 years ago, when I first brought Marcus home to meet my family, I knew there would be resistance. What I didn't expect was the sheer brutality of their reaction. Marcus was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner: kind, intelligent, successful in his career as a software engineer, and completely devoted to me. We'd been dating for 8 months when I finally gathered the courage to introduce him to my parents. I was 27, old enough to make my own decisions, but I still craved their approval. The dinner was a disaster from the moment Marcus walked through the door. Dad barely shook his hand, and Mom's smile was so forced it looked painful. Jessica, who was 24 at the time, made exaggerated small talk that felt more like an interrogation. "So, Marcus, where did you grow up?" Dad asked, his tone suggesting he already disapproved of the answer. West Charlotte, sir. My parents still live in the same house where they raised me and my two sisters. I see. And what do your parents do? Marcus handled their questions with grace, explaining that his father was a mechanic who'd built his own shop from nothing, and his mother taught elementary school for 30 years. Good, honest people who'd worked hard to send their 3 children to college, but I could see it in my family's faces. Nothing he said mattered. They'd already decided who he was based on his appearance. After Marcus left, the real conversation began. Carol, you can't be serious about this, Mom said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. About what? About dating a wonderful man who treats me better than any boyfriend I've ever had? You know what we mean, Dad interjected. Think about the children you'd have. Think about the life you're choosing. What exactly are you saying? I demanded, though I knew exactly what they meant. We're saying that life is hard enough without making it harder, Jessica chimed in. Mixed-race children face challenges you can't even imagine. Is it fair to put them through that? They framed their racism as concern for hypothetical future children. When I called them out on it, they acted hurt, claiming they just wanted what was best for me. The conversation escalated until Dad delivered his ultimatum. If you marry this man, don't expect us to support you, financially or otherwise. Then I guess you won't be supporting me, I shot back. The engagement 6 months later caused another explosion. This time, the threats were more specific. Dad controlled a small family trust that would have helped me buy a house someday. Mom mentioned how disappointed Grandma would be if she were still alive. Jessica started making comments about how I was turning my back on my family. When I announced I was pregnant, the reaction was even worse. Mom actually cried, not tears of joy, but tears of what she called mourning the life you could have had. The wedding was small and tense. My parents attended but looked like they were at a funeral. Marcus's family, in contrast, welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Carol, held my hands and told me she was gaining a daughter. His father, James, walked me down the aisle when my own father refused. When Maya was born, I hoped everything would change. How could they not love this perfect little girl? For a while, it seemed like they were trying. Mom bought baby clothes and offered to babysit sometimes. Dad would hold Maya, though always awkwardly, like he wasn't sure how. But even then, there were signs I chose to ignore. Comments about Maya's hair being challenging or her skin tone being hard to match with colors. When Jessica's twins were born a year later, the difference in treatment was subtle but noticeable. The twins got elaborate nursery decorations and expensive clothes. Maya got practical gifts and hand-me-downs. Marcus noticed it too. Your family tolerates Maya, he said one day after a particularly uncomfortable family dinner. They don't celebrate her. They're trying, I defended them. Change takes time. How much time, Carol? She's 4 years old. When do we stop making excuses for people who should love her unconditionally? Marcus was right, but I wasn't ready to face it. The financial support had become crucial when Dad got laid off from his manufacturing job, and Mom's part-time retail work couldn't cover their mortgage. I found myself paying their bills, Jessica's rent, even groceries for family gatherings where Maya was increasingly treated as an afterthought. I told myself I was being the bigger person, that love would eventually win. But love couldn't win when only one side was fighting for it. The coffee incident forced me to confront memories I'd been suppressing for years. Sitting at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning, I mentally reviewed every family gathering, every birthday party, every holiday, looking for the patterns I'd refused to see. Maya's 5th birthday party was the first clear sign I should have recognized. I'd planned it at my parents' house since their backyard was bigger. Jessica brought elaborate wrapped gifts for the twins, matching princess dress-up sets that cost at least $60 each, just because they saw Maya's party preparations and wanted to feel special too. Maya received a small bag of used clothes from Mom. These are from when Jessica was little, she'd explained. Still plenty of wear left in them. I'd felt embarrassed but convinced myself that practical gifts showed different kinds of love. The birthday photos told a story I hadn't wanted to read. In every group shot, Maya stood at the edge of the frame while Emma and Sophie were positioned front and center. When I looked through Mom's phone later, I realized she'd taken dozens of pictures of the twins, but only a few that included Maya, and those were clearly afterthoughts. Then there was the hair issue. Maya inherited Marcus's thick, beautiful curls, but my family treated her hair like a problem to be solved rather than a feature to celebrate. Mom constantly suggested I do something about that hair, and bought harsh chemical relaxers without asking my permission. It would be so much easier if you just made it more manageable, she'd say, while running her fingers through Emma's and Sophie's straight blonde hair like it was spun silk. When I firmly told her that Maya's hair was beautiful as it was, Mom sighed like I was being unreasonably difficult. I'm just trying to help her fit in better. Fit in where? With who? The questions I should have asked then were finally occurring to me now. The seating arrangements at family dinners became another painful memory to examine. Maya was always placed at the kids' table even when there was room at the main table. Emma and Sophie, despite being older by only a year, often got to sit with the adults because they're better conversationalists. I remembered one Thanksgiving when Maya asked why she couldn't sit with the grown-ups too. Because little girls who interrupt and don't use their best manners need to learn at the kids' table first, Dad had said. But Emma and Sophie interrupted constantly and were considered spirited and confident. The gift disparity went beyond birthdays. At Christmas, the twins received expensive electronics, name-brand clothes, and elaborate toy sets. Maya got educational books and practical items. When I mentioned the imbalance, Mom said, "We believe in giving Maya things that will help her build character and practical skills." Why did Maya need more character building than her cousins? Even the language was different. Emma and Sophie were bright and creative and going to be heartbreakers. Maya was well-behaved and helpful and learning to be responsible. One set of girls was being prepared to receive, the other was being trained to serve. The family photos displayed in Mom's living room were perhaps the most telling evidence. Dozens of pictures of Emma and Sophie at various ages covered the mantelpiece and side tables. Maya appeared in exactly 3 photos, and in 2 of them she was partially obscured by other people. When I'd asked about it once, Mom said, "Oh, you don't visit as often, so I don't have as many opportunities to take pictures." But I'd been there just as frequently, and Maya had posed for plenty of pictures that somehow never made it to frames. The playdates were another painful memory. Emma and Sophie had regular playdates with other children from their school and neighborhood. Maya was rarely invited to join, and when I suggested including her, Jessica would say, "Well, she goes to a different school, so she doesn't really know these kids." Maya went to a different school because it was closer to my apartment and had an excellent diversity program. But somehow this became a reason to exclude her rather than an opportunity to expand the other children's social circles. Even the conversations about the children's futures were different. Jessica talked about Emma and Sophie's college plans, their potential careers, the trips they'd take when they were older. When Maya was mentioned in future tense, it was about whatever path works out for her and we'll see what opportunities come her way. As if opportunities were things that happened to some children, but not others. The most heartbreaking memory was from last summer. We were all at the community pool, and Maya was swimming beautifully. Marcus had taught her when she was 3. A woman complimented her swimming and asked if she was on a team. Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, she's naturally athletic. Good thing, since she'll probably need sports scholarships if she wants to go to college." Emma and Sophie, who could barely float, were never discussed in terms of needing scholarships. Their college education was assumed to be provided, not earned. The financial trap had been set so gradually I hadn't seen it being built around me. It started 3 years ago when Dad lost his job at the textile plant where he'd worked for 15 years. The company downsized, and at 58 he was too old to retrain and too young to retire, as he put it. Mom's part-time job at the department store barely covered groceries. Their mortgage payment was $1,200 a month, and with Dad's unemployment benefits, they were falling behind fast. When they asked for help, how could I say no? They were my parents, and Maya was their granddaughter. Family helps family, right? What started as temporary assistance became permanent dependence. First, I covered their mortgage for just a few months while Dad looked for work. Then it was the car payment when their old Honda broke down. Then Mom's prescription medications when they couldn't afford the insurance copays. By the time I realized the scope of it, I was paying nearly $1,500 a month to keep my family afloat. My own savings account had dwindled to almost nothing. But every time I mentioned scaling back, Mom would get teary-eyed talking about losing the house where Jessica and I grew up. Jessica's situation made it even more complicated. She'd been laid off from her administrative job 6 months ago and was collecting unemployment while looking for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, I was covering her rent, another $800 monthly, plus her car insurance and phone bill. "I can't take just anything," she'd explain. "I have the twins to think about. I need a job with flexible hours and good benefits." The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica needed flexibility for her children, but I was expected to work full-time while paying everyone else's bills and somehow managing single motherhood. When I pointed this out, the response was always the same. "You're so strong, Carol. You can handle anything." What they meant was, "You're useful, so we'll keep using you." The emotional manipulation was sophisticated. Dad would talk about his pride being wounded by unemployment, how hard it was to accept help from his daughter. Mom would mention how grateful they were, how they didn't know what they'd do without me. Jessica would send pictures of the twins in their nice clothes and toys, bought with money I'd given her, with captions like, "Thanks to the best auntie ever." They made me feel like a hero while systematically draining my resources and energy. The power dynamic was crystal clear, though I refused to see it then. Because they depended on me financially, they needed to keep me compliant and willing to continue the payments. But they also needed to maintain their sense of superiority and control. The solution was to accept my money while subtly punishing me for being in the position to provide it. My success became a source of resentment disguised as pride. "Look at our Carol, doing so well for herself," Mom would say to her friends. But the tone suggested I'd somehow gotten above my station. When I bought a reliable used car, the comments were about fancy choices and forgetting where you came from. The most insidious part was how Maya became leverage in this system. When I occasionally mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the financial pressure, Mom would sigh and say, "Well, I suppose we could stop watching Maya since money is tight for you. I'm sure you can find other arrangements." The threat was never stated directly, but it was always there. If I stopped being financially useful, Maya might lose her relationship with her grandparents. And despite everything, I wanted her to have family connections beyond just Marcus and me. So I worked overtime, took on freelance projects, and stretched every dollar to maintain everyone else's stability while my own life remained on hold. I couldn't afford to move to a better neighborhood or save for Maya's college fund, but I could make sure my parents kept their house and Jessica didn't have to take a job she considered beneath her. The financial records told a stark story. In 2.5 years, I'd given my family over $40,000. That was money that could have been Maya's college fund, or a down payment on a house, or simply security for her future. Instead, it subsidized a lifestyle that excluded and diminished her. Even worse, the money gave them permission to continue their treatment of Maya because they knew I wouldn't risk disrupting the arrangement. They could be subtly cruel, knowing I was too invested in keeping the peace to make waves. The financial dependence wasn't just about money. It was about control, power, and maintaining a system where Maya would always be less than her cousins, where I would always be grateful for their tolerance, and where speaking up would cost more than staying silent. Until now. After the coffee incident, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd witnessed. The next few days, I started asking subtle questions during my regular conversations with extended family members. What I discovered made me physically sick. My cousin Rachel, Jessica's best friend since childhood, was the first to confirm my worst fears. We were having coffee while our kids played at the mall playground, a casual conversation that became anything but casual. "I've been wondering how to bring this up," Rachel said carefully, watching Maya push Sophie on the swing set. "Some of the things I've seen at your mom's house, they bother me." "What kinds of things?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping. "Well, like at Emma and Sophie's birthday party last month. Maya spent the whole time fetching drinks for adults and cleaning up wrapping paper while the other kids played. When I offered to help her, your mom said Maya was learning responsibility and I shouldn't interfere." The twins' birthday party. I'd been working late and arrived just as it was ending. Maya had seemed tired, and I'd assumed she'd been playing hard with her cousins. "Rachel, be honest with me. What else have you seen?" She hesitated, then seemed to decide I could handle the truth. "Carol, they call her the little helper when you're not around. And not in a cute way. Like it's her job." Last summer at the family barbecue, Maya was carrying plates and refilling drinks while Emma and Sophie played in the sprinkler. When Maya asked if she could play too, your mom said the other kids' fun shouldn't be interrupted by cleanup that still needed doing. I remembered that barbecue. I'd been impressed by how helpful Maya was being. God, how blind had I been? My Aunt Linda provided even more disturbing details during a phone call that weekend. She'd been staying quiet because she didn't want to cause family drama, but she'd witnessed several incidents that haunted her. "That child gets treated like Cinderella," she said bluntly. At Christmas dinner, she was sent to eat in the kitchen while everyone else sat at the dining room table. Your mother said it was because there wasn't enough room, but there were 2 empty chairs. "Why didn't you say something?" I demanded. "Because every time I tried to include Maya in activities with the other kids, Jessica or your mother would redirect her to some chore. They'd make it seem like Maya preferred being helpful. But Carol, I watched that little girl's face. She doesn't prefer it. She thinks it's what's expected of her." The most damaging revelation came from my Uncle Pete, Dad's brother, who'd apparently been keeping a mental list of incidents because they made him so uncomfortable. They've got that kid convinced she's different from Emma and Sophie in some fundamental way, he told me during a tense conversation at his kitchen table. I heard your mother tell Maya that some children are born to lead and others to follow, and that following was an important job too. Maya nodded like she understood and accepted it. When was this? Last month, at your dad's birthday dinner. Maya was maybe 4 feet away from me, wiping down chairs while the twins played video games on someone's phone. She's 6 years old, Carol. She should be playing video games, not cleaning chairs. Pete's wife, Janet, had been listening from the living room. She joined us, her face flushed with anger I'd never seen from her before. I need to tell you something that's been eating at me for months, she said. At Jessica's baby shower for the twins, your mother was showing off ultrasound pictures and talking about how excited she was to have real grandchildren she could spoil properly. When someone mentioned Maya, she said, well, that situation is complicated, but these two will be straightforward. The words hit me like a physical blow. Real grandchildren. Maya wasn't real to them. She was a complication to be managed. But it was my cousin Mark who revealed the most systematic cruelty. He'd been visiting more frequently since his divorce, helping Dad with household projects, and he'd witnessed what he called training sessions. They're not just treating Maya differently, he explained grimly. They're actively teaching her to accept less. I watched your mother give Emma and Sophie each a cookie, then hand Maya a broken piece and say, some people get whole cookies, some people get pieces, and both are fine. Maya just took the broken piece and said thank you. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. They talk about her like she's not there. I heard Jessica tell your mom that Maya was getting too comfortable asking questions about why she couldn't have the same treats as the twins. Your mother said they needed to nip that entitlement in the bud before she got older and became difficult to manage. The picture was complete now, and it was horrifying. This wasn't unconscious bias or generational ignorance. This was deliberate, systematic psychological conditioning designed to teach my daughter that she deserved less than her cousins because of who she was. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I sat at my laptop researching until my eyes burned. I needed concrete evidence, not just family gossip and my own belated observations. If I was going to protect my daughter, I needed proof that would hold up legally and socially. I needed documentation so clear that no one could dismiss it as misunderstanding or overreaction. The research was both enlightening and terrifying. North Carolina law was very specific about child abuse and neglect, and what I was reading suggested that systematic discrimination and forced labor, even within a family context, could constitute grounds for legal intervention. But I needed evidence. I spent hours reading about hidden cameras, audio recording devices, and the legality of surveillance in different situations. Since I would be recording in my mother's house without her consent, I had to be careful about how I gathered evidence. But as Maya's parent, I had legal rights to document her treatment when I wasn't present to supervise. The equipment was easier to obtain than I'd expected. A quick search led me to several online retailers selling tiny cameras designed for home security. I ordered a small device that could be hidden in Maya's backpack, with battery life long enough to record a full day and memory capacity for hours of footage. The psychological preparation was harder than the technical aspects. I had to face the possibility that what I'd already discovered was just the surface. If my family was willing to be cruel when other relatives were present, what were they doing when they thought no witnesses existed? I also had to prepare for the aftermath. Once I gathered evidence of systematic abuse, there would be no going back to pretending everything was normal. This would either force my family to change completely or destroy my relationship with them entirely. Given their investment in maintaining the current power structure, I suspected it would be the latter. The financial implications were staggering too. If I cut off their support, which would be necessary to show I was serious, my parents could lose their house. Jessica might have to move back in with them or find a job she considered beneath her standards. The twins' lifestyle would change dramatically. For years, I'd been afraid of these consequences. Now I realized that my fear had been enabling abuse. My financial support had given my family the security to mistreat Maya without worrying about consequences. They knew I wouldn't jeopardize the arrangement because I was too invested in keeping everyone happy and stable. But Maya's stability was being sacrificed for everyone else's comfort. I called in sick to work the day the camera equipment arrived. Maya was at school, and I had the apartment to myself to figure out the technical setup. The camera was smaller than I'd expected, about the size of a large button, and came with detailed instructions for hiding it in various objects. Maya's school backpack had a small decorative patch on the front pocket that would provide perfect cover. I carefully created a tiny hole in the fabric behind the patch, positioned the camera lens, and secured it from the inside with the provided adhesive strips. The patch's design made the lens opening invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. The hardest part was planning what to tell Maya. I couldn't explain the real situation without traumatizing her or risking that she'd accidentally reveal the surveillance, but I needed her cooperation to ensure the camera captured useful footage. I decided on a story about wanting to see how her day went when I wasn't there, like a special game where the backpack would remember her activities. Maya loved the idea of her backpack having a special job, and she promised to keep it with her and treat it carefully. That evening, I tested the camera's positioning and sound quality. The footage was clear enough to see faces and read body language, and the audio picked up conversations across a normal-sized room. It wasn't Hollywood-quality surveillance, but it would document whatever was happening in clear, undeniable detail. The night before I planned to execute my recording operation, I lay in bed rehearsing scenarios. What if Maya forgot and left her backpack in another room during crucial moments? What if someone discovered the camera? What if the footage revealed abuse so severe that I'd blame myself for not acting sooner? But the alternative was continuing to enable a system that was teaching my daughter to accept discrimination and abuse as normal. Maya was internalizing lessons about her worth that would damage her for life if I didn't intervene. The morning of the recording felt like preparing for surgery. Everything had to be perfect, and there was no room for error. I woke up early to double-check the camera's battery level and memory capacity. The device was fully charged and ready to record up to 8 hours of footage. Maya was excited about her backpack's special job and promised again to keep it with her all day. I helped her pack her usual items: coloring books, small toys, a juice box for snack time, arranging everything so the backpack would naturally stay with her during activities. Remember, honey? Your backpack is like your buddy today. Don't leave it in another room, okay? It wants to see everything you do. Like a pet backpack? Maya asked, giggling at the idea. Exactly like that. Dropping her off at Mom's house required every acting skill I possessed. I had to seem normal and relaxed while my heart was racing and my palms were sweating. Mom greeted us at the door with her usual grandmother smile, but I found myself studying her expression for signs of the cruelty I now knew existed. Jessica's bringing the twins over in an hour, Mom told me, as Maya hung up her special backpack on the hook by the kitchen table. They're excited to play with Maya. Play. The word felt loaded now that I knew what it really meant. That's wonderful. Maya loves spending time with her cousins. I kissed Maya goodbye, reminding her to take good care of your backpack, buddy, and walked to my car on legs that felt unsteady. Once I was out of sight, I parked at a coffee shop 3 blocks away and tried to calm down. The day at work was torture. Every phone call could have been my mother discovering the camera. Every email notification made my stomach jump. I kept checking the clock, calculating how long the device had been recording, imagining what scenes were being captured. My coworker Janet noticed my distraction during our team meeting. You seem stressed today. Everything okay? Just family stuff, I managed. Nothing serious. But it was the most serious thing I'd ever done. I was potentially documenting criminal behavior by people I'd loved and trusted my entire life. I was gathering evidence that could send my own mother to jail and destroy my family permanently. By lunchtime, I was so anxious I couldn't eat. I kept visualizing Maya in situations I'd witnessed before. Being ordered around while her cousins played, being given different food or different treatment, being made to feel less than. But now those scenes would be documented. The afternoon dragged endlessly. I made mistakes on simple tasks because I couldn't concentrate. When my phone rang at 2:30, I nearly jumped out of my chair, convinced it was Mom calling to confront me about the surveillance. Instead, it was a client with routine questions about a marketing campaign. I handled the call professionally while inside I was screaming. At 4 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I left work early, claiming I had a doctor's appointment. The drive to my parents' house seemed to take forever, even though I was probably speeding. When I arrived, the scene looked normal from the outside. I could hear children's laughter from the backyard, which gave me a moment of relief. Maybe today had been different. Maybe I'd captured footage of Maya being treated well, which would force me to reconsider everything I thought I knew. But as soon as I walked through the front door, that hope evaporated. Maya's in the kitchen finishing up her chores, Mom said without looking up from her magazine. The twins are playing in the living room. Chores. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat in my bedroom with my laptop and the small camera device, my hands shaking as I prepared to review the footage. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing incriminating, that maybe today had been an exception, that my family wasn't as cruel as I'd begun to believe. I was wrong. The footage was worse than my darkest fears. The recording began normally enough, showing Maya's arrival and her excited greeting of Emma and Sophie, but within 30 minutes, the pattern I'd witnessed was in full documented display. Maya, go get us some juice boxes from the refrigerator, Jessica's voice commanded from off-camera. And bring napkins too. Can I have a juice box too? Maya asked. After you finish helping. Emma and Sophie are guests today, so they get served first. Guests. In their own grandmother's house, where Maya spent 3 days a week. What followed was 3 hours of systematic degradation that made my stomach turn. Maya fetched drinks, cleaned spills, organized toys, and swept crumbs while Emma and Sophie lounged on the couch with their tablets and snacks. Every time Maya attempted to join an activity, she was redirected to another task. But it was the conversation between Mom and Jessica, clearly audible while Maya was in the next room, that provided the most damning evidence. She's getting too comfortable asking for things, Jessica complained. Yesterday she asked why she couldn't have the same snacks as Emma and Sophie. I've noticed that too, Mom replied. We need to be more firm about boundaries. Children like Maya need to understand their position early, or they develop unrealistic expectations. Children like Maya. The phrase was delivered with such casual cruelty that I had to pause the recording. It got worse. Around the 2-hour mark, Maya spilled a small amount of juice while refilling the twins' cups. The reaction was swift and harsh. Maya, look what you've done, Mom's voice snapped. This is why some children can't be trusted with nice things. Emma and Sophie would never be so careless. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'll clean it up. Yes, you will. And next time, maybe you'll be more careful. Some people have to work harder to earn privileges. The footage showed Maya, barely 6 years old, scrubbing the floor with tears in her eyes while her cousins continued playing undisturbed. No one comforted her. No one said accidents happen. She was treated like a servant who had failed in her duties. But the most heartbreaking moment came near the end of the recording. Maya, exhausted from hours of work, sat quietly in the corner while Emma and Sophie played a new board game Mom had bought for them. Can I play too? Maya asked softly. This game is for older children who understand complex rules, Mom replied without even looking at her. Why don't you organize the toy box instead? That's more your speed. Maya nodded and began sorting toys while her younger cousins enjoyed their game. The resignation in her posture, the way she accepted this rejection without argument, showed how thoroughly she'd been conditioned to expect less. The audio captured one final exchange that nearly made me vomit. Jessica and Mom were discussing plans for the twins' upcoming school field trip, trying to decide if they should send extra spending money. We want to make sure they can buy whatever catches their eye, Jessica said. It's important for them to feel confident and able to participate fully. Absolutely, Mom agreed. Children need to feel empowered and valued. Speaking of which, we should probably start having Maya help with more household tasks. It's good for children in her situation to develop strong work habits early. Her situation. My daughter's biracial identity was a situation that required different treatment, different expectations, different rules. I watched the footage 3 times, taking notes and screenshots of the most damaging moments. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. This wasn't unconscious bias or old-fashioned child-rearing methods. This was deliberate, systematic psychological abuse designed to teach Maya that she was inherently less valuable than her white cousins. The recordings showed forced labor, emotional manipulation, discriminatory treatment, and psychological conditioning that could cause lasting damage to a child's self-esteem and worldview. Any reasonable person viewing this footage would be horrified. More importantly, any court or child protective services worker would recognize it as abuse. I had my evidence. Now I had to decide what to do with it. I called in sick to work the next morning and spent 2 hours researching the proper channels for reporting child abuse in North Carolina. The process was more straightforward than I'd expected, but emotionally devastating to contemplate. I was about to officially accuse my own family of criminal behavior. The Mecklenburg County Department of Social Services had a Child Protective Services division that handled abuse and neglect cases. I could file a report online or in person, but given the complexity of my situation and the video evidence, an in-person meeting seemed more appropriate. I also researched whether I needed legal representation. Several family law attorneys offered free consultations for abuse cases, understanding that victims often lacked resources. I scheduled appointments with 2 different lawyers for later in the week, but first I needed to file the official report. The DSS office was in a nondescript government building downtown. Walking through those doors felt like crossing a line from which there would be no return. The waiting area was filled with families in various states of crisis. Some angry, some resigned, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. When my name was called, I followed a social worker named Patricia Williams to a small office filled with case files and children's drawings on the walls. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I understand you need to file a report regarding your daughter, she said. pulling out a thick folder of forms. Yes, I have video evidence of systematic abuse and discrimination by my family members. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Video evidence wasn't common in family abuse cases, which often relied on testimony and physical signs of mistreatment. I spent the next hour detailing everything I'd discovered: the financial manipulation, the differential treatment, the forced labor, and the psychological conditioning. Patricia took detailed notes and asked clarifying questions that showed she understood the severity of the situation. "Can I see the video footage?" she asked. I'd transferred the most damaging clips to my phone. Patricia watched in silence, her expression growing more concerned with each scene. When Maya appeared scrubbing the floor while crying, Patricia's jaw tightened visibly. "This is clear documentation of child labor and emotional abuse," she said when the footage ended. "The discriminatory language adds another dimension that makes this particularly serious." "What happens next?" "We'll open a formal investigation within 24 hours. This will include interviews with all parties involved, including Maya. We may need to examine your family's home environment and speak with other witnesses." The thought of Maya being interviewed about abuse made my stomach clench. But Patricia assured me that child services had trained specialists who knew how to talk to young children about difficult topics without traumatizing them further. "Will my family be arrested?" I asked. "That depends on what the investigation reveals and whether the district attorney decides to file criminal charges. What you've shown me could potentially support charges of child abuse, forced labor, and civil rights violations." Civil rights violations. I hadn't even considered that angle, but Patricia explained that systematic discrimination against a child based on race could fall under federal hate crime statutes, especially when combined with abuse. "I need to warn you," Patricia continued, "that filing this report will likely end your relationship with these family members permanently. Abuse cases within families rarely result in reconciliation." "I understand. I can't let this continue." "Good. Children need advocates who are willing to protect them, even when it's difficult." After completing the paperwork, I drove directly to the office of Carol Lannister, one of the family law attorneys I'd researched. Her practice specialized in child custody and abuse cases, with particular experience in discrimination-related family court matters. Attorney Lannister reviewed my documentation with the same serious attention Patricia had shown. "You have an exceptionally strong case," she told me. "Video evidence is rare in family abuse situations, and this footage clearly shows systematic mistreatment. Can I sue them?" "Potentially, yes. We could file civil lawsuits for emotional distress, discrimination, and damages related to the abuse. But I'd recommend waiting to see what criminal charges result from the DSS investigation. Criminal convictions would strengthen any civil case significantly." She explained that I might also be able to seek restraining orders preventing my family from contacting Maya, and that the video evidence could support custody provisions that limited or supervised any future contact. "The financial aspect adds an interesting dimension," she noted. "Your family's dependence on your support while simultaneously abusing your daughter shows a pattern of exploitation that courts take very seriously." By the time I left her office, I felt simultaneously empowered and terrified. The legal system was taking my concerns seriously, but I was about to destroy my entire extended family structure. Maya would lose her grandparents, her aunt, and her cousins. I would lose the family I'd known my entire life, but Maya would be safe. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, 3 days after I filed the report. I was making breakfast for Maya when my phone rang with Jessica's number. "Carol, what the hell have you done?" Jessica's voice was shaking with rage and panic. "I protected my daughter," I replied calmly. "The police were just here. They arrested Mom. They said you filed some bullshit report claiming we abused Maya. This is insane." Through the background noise, I could hear Emma and Sophie crying and Dad shouting at someone. Probably the officers. My stomach twisted with sympathy for the twins. They didn't deserve to see their grandmother arrested. "It's not bullshit, Jessica. I have video evidence." "Video evidence of what? Mom babysitting her granddaughter?" "You've lost your mind, Carol. Maya is fine. She's happy. She loves it because she doesn't know she deserves better treatment than being your family's servant." The silence stretched long enough that I thought Jessica might have hung up. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter but more dangerous. "You just destroyed our family over nothing. Mom's been nothing but good to that kid, and you know it. This is about money, isn't it? You're mad about supporting us, so you made up this story. Watch the footage, Jessica. When the investigators show it to you, watch it and tell me Maya's treatment is normal." "I don't need to watch anything. I was there. I know what happened." "Yes, you were there. You were part of it." Jessica hung up without another word. The next call came an hour later from Dad. His voice was hollow, aged by the morning's events in a way I'd never heard before. Carol, they've charged your mother with multiple felonies. Child abuse, forced labor, civil rights violations. They're saying she could go to prison for years. Dad, don't. Just don't. You've destroyed us. Your mother is 63 years old, Carol. She can't survive prison. The pain in his voice was real, and it cut through my resolve like a knife. But then I remembered Maya scrubbing floors while her cousins played, and my sympathy hardened back into determination. Mom destroyed herself when she chose to abuse her granddaughter. Abuse? Maya was learning responsibility. She was being taught values. She was being taught that she's less than her cousins because of her race. That's not values, Dad. That's bigotry. Dad hung up too. The social media attacks started that afternoon. Jessica had apparently told her version of events to everyone in her network, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who'd fabricated abuse allegations to avoid supporting my family financially. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from extended family members, family friends, and even old high school acquaintances. Most were variations on the same theme. I was crazy, vindictive, greedy, and cruel. How could I put my own mother in jail? How could I traumatize Emma and Sophie by having their grandmother arrested? But a few messages were different. My cousin Rachel texted, "I saw the footage the investigators showed us. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. You did the right thing." My Uncle Pete called to say, "Janet and I are proud of you for protecting Maya. What we saw on that video was sickening." The most important call came from Marcus's mother, Carol. "Honey, Marcus told me what happened. James and I want you to know that Maya will always have grandparents who love her unconditionally. Always." The financial impact was immediate and severe. I canceled all automatic payments to my parents' accounts and Jessica's rent. I transferred my parents' car loan into their names and notified the mortgage company that I was no longer responsible for their payments. Within a week, the consequences cascaded exactly as I'd predicted. Dad called to say they were losing the house. Jessica called to say she was being evicted. The ripple effects of Mom's arrest and my financial cutoff spread through my extended family like a virus, infecting every relationship and revealing truths I'd never wanted to face. Within a month, the comfortable fiction we'd all maintained about being a close, loving family had completely disintegrated. Dad found a job at a hardware store, but at minimum wage, it wasn't nearly enough to cover their expenses without my support. They lost the house within 6 weeks of the arrest, and Dad had to move in with his brother Pete, an arrangement that strained Pete's marriage and created tension throughout that side of the family. Jessica was evicted from her apartment and moved back to Mom's house, which was now empty and headed for foreclosure. She was living there illegally without utilities, desperately searching for employment and affordable housing for herself and the twins. The twins' lives changed dramatically overnight. Emma and Sophie went from being pampered princesses with tablets and new clothes to children whose mother worked double shifts at a call center and whose grandmother was in jail. Jessica had finally been forced to take any job available, and her bitterness poisoned every interaction we had. "Are you happy now?" she screamed at me during one particularly vicious phone call. "My daughters are asking why they can't have the things they used to have. They're asking why their grandmother is in jail. I don't hate Emma and Sophie, Jessica. I hate the way Maya was treated differently. Maya was never treated badly. She was taught responsibility while my girls were allowed to be children. There's a difference." Yes, there is a difference, and that difference is based on race, which makes it abuse. Jessica's response was to block my number and tell everyone who would listen that I was a vindictive sociopath who'd destroyed innocent children's lives over imaginary grievances. The social ostracism was more complete than I'd anticipated. Family friends who'd known me since childhood sided firmly with Mom and Jessica, viewing me as the ungrateful daughter who'd turned on her own blood. Invitations to community events stopped coming. People I'd known for decades crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, each court date bringing fresh waves of anger from my extended family. Mom's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal involving counseling instead of jail time, but the prosecutor's office was unwilling to compromise on such a well-documented case. The civil rights violations charge had attracted federal attention, and the FBI opened an investigation into whether there was a broader pattern of discrimination within our family or social circle. This expansion terrified everyone involved and made me even more of a pariah. "You've brought federal agents into our lives over a 6-year-old being asked to help with chores," my Uncle Steve told me angrily. "Do you understand how insane that sounds?" But the footage spoke for itself. Every time someone tried to minimize Maya's treatment as normal discipline, the investigators would show them the video of my daughter scrubbing floors while crying, or the audio of mom discussing how children, like Maya, needed different treatment. The most painful loss was my relationship with extended family members who'd initially supported me. My cousin Rachel, who'd been the first to confirm the abuse, gradually distanced herself as the legal consequences became more severe. My Aunt Linda stopped returning my calls after her husband couldn't get financial help from me like he'd received before. Even Uncle Pete began suggesting that maybe I'd gone too far with criminal charges. "Your mother made mistakes, but prison seems excessive," he told me. "Couldn't this have been handled within the family?" "We tried handling it within the family for 6 years," I replied. The result was systematic abuse of my daughter. Maya's therapy sessions became a weekly necessity as she processed the sudden absence of her extended family. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a child psychologist who specialized in discrimination-related trauma, worked with Maya to understand that the differential treatment she'd experienced wasn't normal. "Maya has internalized some very damaging messages about her worth," Dr. Martinez explained to me. "She's been conditioned to expect less and to accept unfair treatment as normal. Undoing that damage will take time." 8 months after Mom's arrest, as I write this final chapter, Maya and I have built a life that neither of us could have imagined during those dark days when she was scrubbing floors at her grandmother's house. The transformation in my daughter has been so profound that sometimes I barely recognize the confident, joyful child she's become. Maya no longer asks permission to play or apologizes for taking up space. She demands bedtime stories, negotiates for extra screen time, and complains when she doesn't get her way. All the normal, healthy behaviors of a child who knows she's valued unconditionally. When friends visit our apartment, she shows off her toys without shame and speaks up when she wants something. Dr. Martinez says Maya's recovery has been remarkable, though she warns that some effects may surface as she gets older. For now, Maya is simply a happy 6-year-old who believes she deserves the same treatment as any other child, because she does. The legal proceedings concluded last month with results that vindicated every difficult choice I made. Mom accepted a plea deal that included 18 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling on racial bias, and a permanent restraining order preventing contact with Maya. Jessica was charged as an accessory and received community service plus mandatory counseling. Dad never found steady employment and eventually moved to Florida to live with his sister. The last I heard, he was working part-time at a grocery store and still insisting that I'd destroyed the family over nothing. He sends Maya birthday cards that I intercept and file away. Jessica finally found stable employment as an office manager and rented a small apartment for herself and the twins. Emma and Sophie have adapted to their new circumstances, though Jessica remains bitter about the changes in their lifestyle. She's never acknowledged that Maya's treatment was wrong. The extended family scattered like leaves in a storm. Some relatives moved away to escape the scandal. Others simply stopped speaking to anyone involved. Uncle Pete divorced his wife partially due to stress from the situation, and several other marriages strained under the financial pressures. I feel no guilt about these consequences. Adults who built their comfort on a foundation of child abuse earned every hardship that followed. Their loyalty was never to me or Maya. It was to a system that benefited them at our expense. The financial freedom from cutting off my family's support has been transformative. For the first time in years, I'm saving money for Maya's college fund instead of paying other people's bills. We moved to a better apartment in a more diverse neighborhood where Maya attends a school that celebrates her heritage. Maya has new friends from many different backgrounds, and she's learning that families come in all colors and traditions. She's taking swimming lessons, piano lessons, and art classes, activities I couldn't afford when I was supporting my entire extended family. Marcus's family has stepped in to fill the grandparent role with enthusiasm and genuine love. Carol and James treat Maya like the treasure she is, spoiling her appropriately and never suggesting that she should earn affection through service. Maya calls them Grandma Carol and Grandpa James. Some people say I should feel guilty about tearing apart my family, but I disagree. I didn't tear anything apart. I simply stopped holding together something that was fundamentally broken. The family structure that existed before was built on hierarchy, discrimination, and exploitation. Maya doesn't ask about her grandmother anymore, though she occasionally mentions missing Emma and Sophie. When she does, I remind her that we can't control other people's choices, but we can control how we respond to them. Today, as I watch Maya play in our living room, completely absorbed in building an elaborate castle with her blocks, I feel a peace I never experienced during the years I was trying to maintain relationships with people who saw her as less than. She's humming to herself, completely confident in her right to take up space. This is what I fought for. This moment of unguarded joy, this assumption of worth, this freedom from having to earn basic human dignity. Maya will grow up knowing that she deserves respect and opportunity, not because of what she does for others, but because of who she is. The fortress I've built around her isn't made of walls. It's made of love that teaches her she belongs in the world exactly as she is.